Caymas Boats, from the mind of Earl Bentz. Excellence, tradition, and service, all part of the Caymas Advantage. On the water, perfection. This is your next boat. Build your next boat at CaymasBoats.com. Ducket Fishing, pro-driven rods, reels, and baits. The choice of champions. Check out DucketFishing.com to see what everybody's talking about. Ducket Fishing, pro-driven. It's clear that your boating career benefited from your experience in the racing world. Talk a little bit about how your racing gives you a perspective that maybe other boat builders wouldn't have.
Well, when you race, you know, the only way that you're going to get better is to try things, to test. Everything doesn't work. You test, you try things, you go back to the drawing board, you try again, and each time you take 2 steps forward, 1 back, 2 forward, 1 back. But we tested we from daylight to dark. I mean, we would go to Lake Havasu City, for instance, the entire month of January, or down at Lake X, down in Kissimmee, Florida. And when everything froze up in Wisconsin, where we were headquartered in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, all the lakes froze up. So we'd go to either Lake Havasu, stay at the Nautical Inn, or we'd test the entire month of January, and we would try different gear patterns, different rings, different pistons, different gear case designs, different hull designs. And there were times that we would run a boat in the morning, bring it back to the shop, strip the running pad off the bottom, change the hedral angle on the bottom of the pads, and work all night and have it back on the water the next day to try something new. And again, like I say, sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. But you always strive for perfection. And we carried that into hull design and bass boats. We tested. There was a guy named Rourke Summerford that I started working in hydrosport with in 1975, and Rourke was a racer, a perfectionist, and he enjoyed testing much like I did, and we still do it today. You know, so many manufacturers that they'll take a hull design and say, well, that's good enough. Well, you know, in my entire career, we've never settled for that's just good enough. We want something that's going to give it all to you, a good hole shot, turn well, doesn't do anything stupid. It's predictable. It's dry. It's soft, which is even more important now as our demographics of our customer ages and gets a little older. He doesn't want to get wet and doesn't want to get beat up. So we test, and that applies not just to bass boats, but our saltwater hulls as well.
After your racing career, you fished for a while. You fished some bass tournaments. What is it about speed that draws the competitive angler in?
Well, you know, we're racing 30, 35 races a year. And like I say, I spent 7 months of the year on the road, 2 months a year in Europe and racing. And to just flip the switch and quit racing, I had to find something to fulfill that competitive spirit in me. And so I started fishing tournaments professionally, and I'd fish some regional tournaments. I fished a few BASS tournaments, but I was working and at the time running hydrosport boats. And so I couldn't take off a week at a time or 2 weeks to go fish professionally, but I did fish several BASS invitations. But at regional tournaments, I would usually fish 2 tournaments a week many times, one on Saturday, one on Sunday. And I enjoyed the heck out of it. And, you know, I'm competitive. The competition was good. Our regional fishermen were extremely talented and dang tough to beat. And from a fishing perspective, you know, they were a heck of a lot better than me, but they taught me a lot. And I learned from them. And, just enjoyed the camaraderie. It gave me a chance to mingle with our customers and interface with them. And many of them were buddy tournaments where you get to spend the day in the boat with someone you enjoyed being with. I did fish the old Red Man Trail back years ago, and many of those events. And it was a draw deal, but really enjoyed the team events where I could get in the boat with somebody that I wanted to spend the day with, and just have a lot of fun and go fishing and be a little competitive at the time.
Now you've also been associated with other boat companies. Obviously, Hydrosport. You founded Stratos, and later you founded Triton. Talk about how boat design changed over the course with those different companies.
Well, I remember when the first V6 Mercury came out back in the mid '70s. We were racing fuel injected V6 outboards on our race boats, and our test station was Plant 38 up in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, and they were testing these production engines on these big 24-foot center consoles. And I told the engineers, I said, "You better get a bass boat up here." And they said, "Oh no, motor's way too big." It was the first Black Max 175 is too big for a bass boat, too heavy, too big. Nobody's going to buy them. So I towed a Hydrosport up there in a 17.5-foot Hydrosport, and we put one on it and ran it. And anyway, make a long story short, after the first year, 80% of the sales of the Black Max went to bass fishing. 80%. So that got Mercury's attention.
Yeah, I bet.
And they ended up designing propellers, gear case designs, and other things. And at the same time, the engine went a lot faster than these boats were designed to go. So because of the weight, we had to start changing the bottom, changing the size of the running pads, and a little more wedge on help the boats would porpoise anything below 35, 40 miles an hour. They'd porpoise and beat you to death because of the weight. So the engine surpassed boat design. So it put us back to work on hull design. And eventually, just like today, we've got boats today that perform extremely well with these big engines on them, and are safe to operate.
In 2018, you started Caymas Boats, and immediately there was a difference that separated Caymas Bass and Caymas Walleye boats from the competition. You touched on it a minute ago, and that is the running pad. Talk about the design of these new boats.
You know, back years ago, the standard running pad was 10 inches wide. In some cases, Paul Allison, who was really the guy, the pioneer of pad bottom boats back in the 60s, had a 5 to 7 inch wide running pad on the race boats. And as we added more weight, the pads got wider to carry more weight. Well, back in the mid 90s, when we were designing hulls, we had a 10 inch wide pad. We did not have 36 volt trolling motors back then. We didn't have power poles. If you did have a hydraulic jack plate, that meant you had money. You were rich. Most boats just had a fixed plate. So today, a 36 volt trolling motor is common, and 4 to 5 batteries in the back of a boat is common. Power poles, and there are people that put power poles on that fish in 60 to 80 feet of water. They just have it because it looks cool, but it adds another 120 pounds of weight to the back of the boat. And so we've added, in effect, you take the power poles and the 1 or 2 extra batteries, you've added 250 to 300 pounds more to the back of the boat. And the engines are pretty much the same weight that they were back in the 80s and 90s, but we've gone from a 10-inch pad to a 16-inch wide pad on the Caymas hull. We've changed the bottom of the boat to help lift the stern, get on plane to pick the boat up, minimize power rise, carry a load better, makes the boat a little easier to drive. And we did some other things too to incorporate a little sharper V in the front to make the boat incredibly soft and smooth and dry. So it's a hull that's designed to carry the weight that these anglers are putting in the boats now. And so it's just part of the evolution. I look back in the 60s, the old flat bottom PR boats that flat bottom things are rough. They didn't turn well. They were wet. And You know, in the 70s when they introduced the Black Max and heavier engines, and going from 55 or 60 miles an hour to 70 to 75 miles an hour, and the additional weight of the engines, the evolution of trolling motors and electronics and all of that stuff. We've added so much weight to these boats that evolution's been fun to be a part of, Keith.
You know, one of the things that I notice with the Caymas bass boats and the walleye boats, I've been in a lot of them lately at boat shows, but Caymas runs its gas tanks up the middle of the boat. A lot of the competitors are still sticking them in the back. Does that have to do with the weight, with extra batteries and things like that, or what made you guys decide to do that, and when did you do that?
Fuel is not a constant. The weight of a battery is a constant. You know, that's always there. But, you know, you get 50 gallons of fuel, 300 pounds of weight. Sometimes you've got a full tank. Sometimes you've got a quarter of a tank. So you may have a 200-pound variation from one day to the next. So we try to put it at the fulcrum point so it really doesn't have any, and it's fore and aft too, by the way, not side to side. You know, we used to put fuel tanks side to side. Well, when these boats get up on the pad and that fuel's sloshing, even though you got baffles in it from one side to the other, it would tend to add to a chine walk of a boat. So we put it on the fulcrum, so it doesn't make any difference whether you got a full fuel load or an empty fuel load. It doesn't affect the bow rise and the planing ability and blocking the vision of the operator. So it goes fore and aft. When you get the boat up on pad, it makes it easier to drive and also gives you more consistent performance, whether you got a full load or a half a load or a quarter pack of fuel. So that's really the reason for doing that.
Fascinating. I'm Keith Neiswanger. This is the Bass Tour Anglers Podcast. Please remember to like and subscribe. If you'd like to reach us, please send us a direct message on Instagram at Bass Tour Anglers Podcast. Take care. Be safe. We'll talk to you next time.